Every choice you think you made freely might have been decided by symbols you never consciously noticed. They've been shaping you your entire life, and they still are. There's something deeply unsettling about this realization. Most of your strongest beliefs didn't come from careful reasoning. They came from patterns you absorbed before you could even think critically. Symbols, images, shapes that bypassed your rational mind and went straight into the part of you that feels before it thinks. This isn't manipulation in the obvious sense. It's something far more sophisticated. It's how human consciousness actually works. Your brain doesn't process reality directly. It processes symbols of reality. And whoever controls those symbols controls the lens through which you see everything. Consider this: when you see certain colors arranged in specific patterns, your body responds before your mind catches up. Red and blue in certain configurations trigger political identity. Golden arches trigger hunger and familiarity. A swoosh triggers aspiration and movement. These aren't accidents. They're engineered to exploit how your brain categorizes meaning. Symbols don't argue with you. They don't present evidence. They simply resonate at a frequency your unconscious recognizes. And when something resonates, you don't question it. You just know it feels right. But here's what almost no one notices. This mechanism is ancient. It predates language. It predates written law. Circles, triangles, crosses, spirals, eyes. These forms carried meaning across civilizations that never contacted each other. Why? Because the human brain is wired to recognize archetypal patterns. And those patterns create instant emotional responses. Security, danger, power, submission, all triggered by shapes you've seen 1,000 times without ever consciously studying them. And this is where it gets unsettling. Because if symbols create meaning, and meaning creates behavior, then whoever designs the symbols designs the behavior. Not through force, not through argument, through resonance. Through the illusion that you chose freely when really, you were responding to something planted deep in your cognitive architecture. Something you inherited. Something that's been there all along, waiting to be activated. If this interests you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Why power has always spoken in symbols, not words. Here's what they don't teach you in school. Empires weren't built on speeches. They were built on symbols that made obedience feel natural. A crown, a throne, an eagle, a lion. These weren't decorations. They were psychological weapons. They communicated hierarchy without explanation. They created reverence without requiring belief. You didn't need to understand why the king wore a crown. You just needed to feel smaller when you saw it. And you did. Because that's what the symbol was designed to do. This pattern repeats everywhere. Religious architecture isn't just beautiful. It's designed to make you feel transcendence, awe, and your own insignificance simultaneously. Political monuments aren't just commemorative. They're designed to anchor national identity in stone, so massive you can't imagine it ever changing. Corporate logos aren't just branding. They're tribal markers that tell you who belongs and who doesn't. All of this operates below the level of conscious thought. You see the symbol, you feel the response, you act accordingly. But here's the detail most people miss. These symbols don't need to be understood to work. In fact, they often work better when they're not understood. Mystery creates reverence. When you can't fully explain why something feels powerful, you assume the power must be real, and that assumption becomes self-fulfilling. The symbol gains authority not because of what it is, but because of what people collectively agree it means. And once that agreement solidifies, the symbol becomes reality. Drop a comment if any of this has ever clicked for you before. Think about currency. A piece of paper or a digital number has no intrinsic value, but the symbols on that paper, the trust in the system, the collective belief that it means something creates actual power, real consequences, real hierarchies, all based on symbolic agreement. This isn't ancient history. This is happening right now. In every transaction, in every political rally, in every logo you trust, symbols are creating the world you live in. And most people never even notice. How do symbols make you believe things you never question? There's a mechanism at work that most people never become aware of. It's called symbolic conditioning, and it's devastatingly effective. Here's how it works. you see a symbol repeatedly associated with a specific emotion, value, or identity. Over time, your brain creates an automatic connection. You don't need to think anymore. You just respond. The flag makes you feel patriotic. The logo makes you feel trust. The uniform makes you feel respect. None of this required your conscious consent. It just happened, through repetition, through cultural immersion, through symbols doing what they do best, bypassing reason entirely. And this is where it becomes genuinely disturbing, because you think you chose your values. You think you decided what matters to you. But did you? Or did you absorb symbolic narratives that told you what a good person believes, what success looks like, what strength means, what beauty is? These aren't natural truths. They're symbolic constructs, and they vary wildly across cultures and time periods, which means they're not universal. They're designed, and you internalize them without realizing you were being programmed. Consider how technology amplifies this. Social media platforms use symbols to trigger instant emotional reactions. A heart, a thumbs up, a retweet. These aren't neutral. They're engineered to activate reward circuits in your brain. They create addiction through symbolic feedback loops. You post, you see the symbol, you feel validation, you post again. The symbol trained you, and you didn't even notice it happening. If this content is helping you see things differently, leave a like. It helps the channel continue. But the most unsettling part isn't that symbols influence you. It's that they influence you while making you feel like you're choosing freely. That's the real power. Not obvious control, but invisible guidance. You think you're making independent decisions, but you're navigating through a landscape of symbols that were designed to push you in specific directions. And the scariest part, most of those symbols were designed so long ago that no one even remembers who created them. They just are, and you just respond. What if AI is just the latest symbol of control? Here's something that should genuinely concern you. Artificial intelligence isn't creating new forms of influence. It's perfecting old ones. Think about how algorithms work. They don't show you reality. They show you symbols that reinforce what you already believe. They create echo chambers not of isolation, but of meaning. And inside those chambers, certain symbols become truth. Not because they're factual, but because they're repeated. And repetition is how symbols gain power. Always has been. Look at how AI is being presented symbolically. The glowing brain, the neural network, the oracle that knows more than you do. These aren't just marketing images. They're modern mythological symbols. They're creating the same psychological effect that temples and oracles created thousands of years ago. The sense that there's a higher intelligence you should defer to. You're not being told to obey. You're being made to feel like obedience is wisdom. That's exponentially more effective. And here's what makes this particularly powerful. It doesn't just use symbols. It generates them. It creates personalized symbolic environments tailored specifically to your psychological profile. It knows what images make you pause, what words trigger emotion, what narratives you're most likely to believe, and it optimizes everything to keep you engaged. This isn't science fiction. This is happening now. Every feed you scroll, every recommendation you receive. Symbolic conditioning at scale, automated and invisible. But the deeper truth is this. AI didn't invent this game. It just made it faster and more precise. Humans have been using symbolic systems to organize behavior for millennia. Flags, anthems, rituals, brands, icons, all of them doing the same thing AI does now, creating meaning, triggering emotion, shaping action. The technology changed. The mechanism didn't. And that should tell you something profound about how human consciousness actually works. We don't respond to reality. We respond to symbols. And we always have. Why? Seeing symbols might be your only defense? If symbols shape perception, and perception shapes reality, then becoming aware of symbols isn't just knowledge. It's immunity. Not complete immunity, but enough to stop reacting automatically. Enough to pause. Enough to ask, why am I feeling this? Why does this image trigger loyalty? Why does this phrase make me defensive? Why does this pattern feel sacred? Once you start asking those questions, the symbol loses some of its grip. Not all of it, but enough. Think about how many times you've felt something powerful in response to an image, a song, a space, without knowing why. That's the symbol working. It activated something cultural, something archetypal, something you inherited without choosing to inherit it. And you responded as if it were instinct. But it wasn't instinct. It was conditioning, symbolic conditioning so deep it feels natural. But now that you know this, something shifts. You can observe, you can notice, you can choose, and that's real power. But here's the final paradox. The more you see symbols, the more you realize they're everywhere. In politics, in spirituality, in entertainment, in technology, in relationships, in everything that shapes how you see the world and how you see yourself in it. And maybe that's disturbing, because it means much of what you thought was yours might have been planted, not by conspiracy, but by symbolic repetition, by cultural narratives, by meanings you never consciously accepted, but accepted anyway. If this video expanded your awareness, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Comment which part hit you the hardest. And maybe the real question isn't whether symbols control you, it's which symbols you're going to choose to recognize. Because they'll keep existing, they'll keep operating. But if you see them, you can decide. And conscious decision is the only freedom in a world built from symbols. Because symbols only control those who don't see them. And now you see. And that changes everything. Or at least it should.